Like Hodges' Square in the Circle was made for television and broadcast back in the golden age of Channel 4, with its last transmission being over 20 years ago and no DVD release in sight. This year's screening at CineCity was a rare opportunity to see the film and also discuss it with Hodges himself at the Q&A.
Yes, welcome back. Delighted to welcome Mike Hodges, director of Square in the Circle, and obviously a host of other films. Before I open up to questions from the audience, I'd like to start, if I may. Mike, you wrote a lovely piece in The Guardian the week before last, talking about your lost films, all the films like Pulp and Terminal Man that have suffered at the hands of distributors and sort of, well, disappeared somewhat. And you describe them as films in a bottle that might surface at some point, sometime, someplace. I suppose Square in the Circle fits in with that idea of films in bottles, not having been in cinemas or released on DVD. So how do you feel about seeing it after 25 years?
Well, I must say it's a very odd experience for me, I can tell you, because I haven't seen it since I made it, and I don't think I've ever seen it on a big screen like this. I was pretty amazed by the quality, I must say. I was rather pleased about that. And I pretty astonished that I was able to pull it off, because we shot this in 28 days. That's a lot of shots. It was it's a political polemic, really, and the difficulty of making it was that Stoppard had written, a very complicated political piece, and the test was really to turn it into a film, to make it visual. I think I was probably about the 6th or 7th director to be offered the film. And I think that the only way to crack it was to shoot it in a studio. All of that was shot in one small studio in Twickenham. And I think I got together with Wojtek, who is an old friend, a Polish production designer. He did Cul-de-sac with Polanski. And I'd known him for years as a friend, but I'd never worked with him, and he seemed to be the obvious choice. I mean, he was Polish, he came out of Poland during the war, and we had basically this script from Stoppard, which I was sort of very excited by, because I found the idea of a satire, a political satire, is a very interesting thing to try and achieve. And really and truly, in about a day, we worked out how we could make all these various scenes work. There must be at least 100 different locations in that film. And Wojtek came up with this idea of building the metal structure, the grid, which you could then use as an airport, you could use it as the Politburo, you could use it for all sorts of things that very simply could be adapted. And we sort of resolved the problem really quite quickly. I added the cafe with Ashkenazi's son on the piano, and I then sort of was able to incorporate the narrator, because one of the major problems was getting a flow to the film with Richard Crenna. Tom Stoppard himself had always anticipated playing that role himself for obvious reasons. But needless to say, the box office of the television, because it was mostly American money, insisted they had an American play that role. And I think Crenna did an incredibly good job, I have to say, looking at it. And so we put the piece together, basically, and found various inventive ways of making each scene work. I mean, it's pretty dense stuff, isn't it, that you're dealing with there? I have to say, the one amazing thing I found watching that film is how relevant it is now. I just watched it and I thought, my God, it could be this country, not the communist element of it, but the deception, the bankruptcy of ideas is in that film, and that was made 25 years ago. Nothing seems to have changed. It's desperately sad, isn't it? Did you find it relevant? It's incredible. I'm so astonished how relevant it was and how we're all being so deceived and cheated. And you don't need a communist regime to do it. You've got one already in this country. It doesn't matter which party you have. I'm shocked by watching this film. I found it so extraordinarily touching, actually. Sorry, I'm going on a bit now. I thought I should be in it. So we managed to put it together in this curious way. Everything in it. Oh, I'll tell you the really interesting thing was that when Wojtek and I came up with this suggestion of how to do it, because the previous directors had sort of talked about shooting it on location, shooting it in the docks in Liverpool, shooting it, all the various places. And of course it just would not work because it's largely dialogue and you have to hear the words. If you shot it on location, you'd have had interruption from planes, cars, and so on. So the actors had to be given the chance to deliver the lines. And the company that I made it for said that was fine. But the one area where they insisted that we use a real location were the beach scenes. Now I knew that if I used a real beach, the conceit of the piece would be completely destroyed, because once you have a real location in there, the idea, the central idea of the whole piece would vanish. I had made, this is going to sound a bit ridiculous, but I'd made Flash Gordon some years before it's going to the opposite extreme. And I'd worked with an amazing production designer called Danilo Donati. And Danilo Donati had worked with Fellini an awful lot. And he'd done a film which I happen to love, which was called, what's it called? Casanova. And I talked to him a lot. How many of you have seen Casanova? Right. Well, Casanova was a very theatrical film, and Danilo was a very theatrical production designer. And there's a scene in it where Casanova, played by Donald Sutherland, is rowing across to this island, and he had this brilliant idea of laying black plastic that he got wind machines to sort of move up and down, and there's Donald rowing there, because the film was very, again, like this one, was very theatrical. So I always knew that if I could, in the progress of making the film, I would somehow get the beach scenes shot in the studio as well. We luckily ran out of money. I mean, we began to not have enough money to go to the location, to take a whole crew down there, the actors and so on, to the beach scenes. So I said to Wojtek, I know how to do it. All we do is get a large sheet of clear plastic, and a ton of pebbles, and various props, and a wind machine underneath the plastic. And then you bang the lights onto the plastic, and it shimmers like the ocean, and it stays within the kind of piece that we were making. It stays within the film. I must say, I came with some trepidation tonight to wonder whether it worked. I think it worked incredibly well. So even that I managed to sort of get away with in the end. So the only thing that was not shot in the Twickenham studio, which is not a big studio, it's a comparatively small stage, was indeed the helicopter. So that's the story of that film.
And it's fair to say it had a troubled production
history.
Yes,
a lot of my films have troubled production.
Yes, come on.
So the Americans, you see, then when it's all very strange, but they had a line producer who kept interfering on the floor. They were so nervous of the production. And eventually I said, look, if they let him on the floor, I'm not a violent man, but I'll put a machete through his head. So I never saw him again. They got rid of him. But of course, they had the revenge at the end when they want to re-edit when you finish the film. And they wanted to re-edit. They didn't like the beginning, and they didn't like... And then they say things like, is a truck driver in Denver going to understand this film? So you say, why did you make it? Why did you get Stoppard, buy his script, put money into it? If you were asking me whether a truck driver in Denver is going to understand it, maybe the truck driver in Denver will understand it. And I managed to keep my version. I went in to do the music, which was a very sad moment for me because Roy Budd did the music